Good morning and welcome to the February 7th meeting of the Assessors for the town of Stockbridge. First up is Mike.
I'm just gonna, I put last meeting minutes. I didn't bring them with me, but I know that there's only two things that were carried over, form of list and 3 BCs, I&E statements mailed, that's number 6. Number 2, Michael Canales is here to talk about how we can use overlay funds for various fiscal 23 items that we've listed in our budget. Mike?
Whatever is in here, I guess I'll over here, so I'm okay.
Morning, Mike.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
So we're beginning our budget 2023 analysis and putting together the budget, looking at all our reserves, every funding source that's available. So as we go through that, I get a copy from the treasurer's office of every account that we have and what can we use it for. So one of the things that we did notice is that there are some surpluses in previous years in the assessor's overlay. So the overlay for the assessors is set up to cover any shortages. Could be from an ATV case, could be abatements, exemptions, or any other receivable that for whatever reason we have an exposure to. Over time, those exposures vanish and then previous year's overlay amounts are no longer needed. So the money's just sitting there. It's already been raised by taxation because it's part of setting the tax code or our tax amount. And what we then do is we get to the point where there's a surplus. So this year we were looking at it, Mike's identified about $20,000 worth of items that need to be done as part of our revalve with the state. Every 5 years we have to have the revalve with the state. So we began discussing the fact that this would be, instead of raising separate monies, since these monies have already been raised, would be declaring a surplus in the overlay. Once you declare the surplus in the overlay, this committee sends a letter to myself. I then have the accountant and treasurer who verify that the surplus does exist. There's nothing outstanding against it that would prevent us from allowing that money to be used. And then the money either reverts to free cash effective June 30th, if it's just declared surplus, or prior to June 30th at town meeting, it can be appropriated for a particular project. The nice thing about it, once again, is the fact that this is money already that has been raised in previous years through taxation. So we just didn't see the need this year to place $20,000 on the budget to be raised in taxation if we have a funding source. So that's what I'm asking this committee to do, is to declare $20,000 in surplus that would then be available to be appropriated at town meeting. So if there's any questions.
Yeah, I mean, so we do this on a regular basis. We always give back whatever is excess in the overlay. So this is a standard procedure for us. So is 20,000 appropriate, or should we be reducing the overlay by even more? So, and again, and there's the overlays, we have $20,000 worth of expenses, but.
Well, I wrote, see our budget is up at top that we submitted, but the bottom portion are the items that Mike's talking about. So it comes to 17.4, but there could be a difference.
You're asking a separate question.
I am.
You're actually asking, is there even
Should we be letting more money go?
funds that could be determined to be surplus?
Correct.
And then those will revert back to free cash
Sorry.
the following year if not appropriated at town meeting.
Right.
So we can do that analysis. We did do the analysis. We do know that within the next year, we should have, because we put extra money in the overlay the last 2 years. And I never like touching the overlay myself before you get past the first couple of years, and there's still some outstanding things, but there are some ATV cases that should be solved very shortly. And then there's the cases in 2018, which
are all resolved. Yep.
And there is 60,000 that in surplus for that year. So we could probably go up to 60,000 if needed.
Well, yeah, it's just, because again, the state requires us to put money in the overlay account, even though we might not even need it.
Yep.
And so this money sort of grows, and every couple of years we review it and we send back a whole bunch of money to the town. So
It's been a few years since we turned any money over.
You don't have a lot compared to previous years. You had some ATV chases and other things that.
Well, I mean, one thing we've done, Mike, too, is that we haven't put as much in either, knowing that, we haven't needed it, so we haven't allocated extra monies either.
Well, and the thing is, years ago, the overlay accounts used to be for specific years.
Years.
And now,
Anymore.
Yep.
yeah, so now in theory, it's one account. So money from other years can be used for the current year. So therefore
Right.
we can be a little bit more.
And we did.
Right.
This time around fiscal 22, we added almost 60,000 to it because the fare of the utility company increases. But it turned out that even if they were late or they applied last year, it doesn't affect the amount of extra money that we put in. So once we settle the abatements for this year, we will still have a couple appellate tax board cases to deal with, but there won't be any large abatements going back to the utility company. So it's a good thing that we put in more. Most communities were. I mean, our increases in utility companies was substantial according to the DOR. So that was a good thing that we did, but at least going forward, like Mike said, wait a few years and see, we'll be able to turn that money over as well.
Now, the other thing is right. The other thing is can we lower our overlay amounts? Because that was the original. So back when they first did it and got rid of the years, a lot of assessors made the assumption that they were going to allow us to then, if we were carrying a surplus, not to carry as much. But DOR has pretty much continued to make us.
They have.
Which is sort of interesting. It's like, well, then why'd you get rid of that old system? Because the old system allowed you to very clearly identify the overlays.
Yep.
But they never actually turned it around and said, oh, yeah, by the way, you don't have to put anything this year in your overlay because you already have a surplus. They really haven't gone that route. They still make you put an amount away.
And they haven't.
An interesting thing, because I remember when it came out, reading it and that, so.
They were supposed to revise the OL1 form that we signed,
And they never
which we do the 5-year average.
Yeah.
They never did. So again, they made it all into one, but most communities are still, I mean, yes, we consider it one, but I have spreadsheets for every fiscal year. I think all of us do, that show how much we're taking out of each year. So we know exactly still what's in there.
Because you still have to do the calculation where after the Board of Assessors determines it's a surplus, you still have to send it to the accountant and treasurer, who then compare those years against the years that we're saying it's a surplus and then verify that it actually is a surplus. So, because what you don't ever want to do is declare it a surplus and then have an excess surplus. If you did that by accident, then it comes off your free cash calculation. So, it's one of those things, you want to be safe. So they sort of half moved, but they never finished the full move. So we're still in the process of just declaring a surplus. For this, we can look at this year if you want, but I do think we're going to come back next year just asking for a transfer back to free cash, just because I think the 2022 budget's going to carry substantial.
Yeah, I mean,
we just didn't see the abatements we thought, and everybody was being warned with the utility upgrade to be prepared, and it didn't materialize. So.
And we just had a big one drop out too.
yeah. I think my biggest concern was that basically, as you alluded to, this overlay fund was to help offset any abatements that we had to do versus use it to pay for actual expenses that theoretically could have been put in a budget item. So it was just, my concern was just, are we doing the proper thing? And because we don't want to be taking money from the overlay account to do operating expenses. So as long as we have the blessing of you and the town, I think we're fine. I'm fine with it.
Yeah. We just wanted to make sure that,
That we're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is, like I said, our number one reason for proposing this is that if there is truly a surplus, then why place these items in a budget that only come up every 5 years and put it on the tax rate and it won't come back? Now, these items won't show up again for 5 more years. And my recommendation would be to, in 5 years, to look at the surplus again, to cover these costs. And I know that's pretty common in a lot of communities. I know I used to do it up in Clarksburg. We did it in North Adams. And I'm very familiar with this. I'm also a trained assessor, so I'm familiar with doing this type. So That's what we're asking for this year. If you want us to take a deeper analysis to see if there's the possibility of more than the 20, I would say it's not going to be substantially more, because I think the years that are dropping off, there's a couple that, like Mike said, 2022 is going to have a substantial, just because the utilities didn't happen. And the only year is that 2018, where those ATV cases have been settled, that we could look at dipping a little more into surplus, but then it would revert to free cash. And right now our free cash is incredibly strong.
Okay.
So I don't think there's right now a risk. And we're not seeing the number. Mike said the last time you did it, you transferred something like 214,000.
We did.
We do not have
Quite a
that
bit.
kind of surplus. If we're talking about 40 to 50,000
Yeah.
right now in surplus, and we're asking you to pull 20 out of it. So we're not at an excessive point at this point.
Yeah, because in years past, we've usually put away 100, 80,
Yeah.
bigger amounts. And then the last few years, we've realized that it's just isn't necessary, so we haven't done it.
But with that being said, the state we
Yes.
tried to do overlays less, and the state comes back and
And they
wants the
say, well,
overlay to be higher than we.
Yeah, they contradict themselves.
Yeah,
They really
so-
have.
Yeah, so we're trying to minimize the use of the overlay account, but the state's making us put away more money than we
Yeah.
additionally need.
I mean, they know that eventually we're gonna end up turning it over, but there are some communities
They'd rather have you-
that don't.
Right, yeah, no, there's some communities that allow it to build up, and right now DOR is just risk adverse, so they'd rather have the money in there, and if you end up with a surplus, every couple of years, declare it a surplus and turn it back over.
Fine.
Is there a deadline for when we have to, for budget purposes, do the letter?
Yeah, you need to submit the letter, we need to verify that the amount is, once it's verified that the amount is, it becomes subject to appropriation, or like I said, if you don't appropriate, it just turns back to free cash. And so the annual town meeting should be at the regular time. I'd rather have, if this board would approve it, then we begin the process, and probably by the end of the month, have it certified that this amount is a surplus, and then can go to town meeting for an appropriation.
So the town meeting still has to appropriate this.
Because if you don't appropriate it, as of June 30th, it just goes into your free cash calculation.
Okay.
So, in the year you did the 214, I don't know if they had specific items they wanted to appropriate. If they didn't, it became part of the following year's free cash calculation. So,
Yeah, I know it was a shortfall budget-wise. Remember when Georgia requested?
Yeah.
But I don't think there were specific items at the town meeting that they used it for.
in this case, we're going to go because under this section of law, the overlay surplus can be appropriated for any lawful purpose by your legislative body, and any amount not appropriated by June 30th goes to your undesignated fund balance and in general becomes part of your free cash calculation.
Okay, good.
Right?
So somebody to make a motion, or I make a motion that we start the process to move over $20,000 from our overlay account for this purpose.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Thanks, Mike.
All right?
Thank you,
Thanks,
Mike.
Thank you, Michael.
I'll get that going.
Yeah.
So you'll get me do we have to check the balances first or?
Now you submit the letter,
Okay.
then the treasurer and accountant verify that
All right.
is truly a surplus, and then it becomes subject to appropriation. Then we can appropriate at town meeting.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank
you.
you.
Michael, thanks for making these
Oh, you're welcome.
so big so I could read them.
Actually, you know what? That's Mike's fault. This is his spreadsheet. So what I did is I added,
It's the same size as my
the
prescription.
property record.
Yeah.
I put the property record card sketch one on here too. I mean, technically it's not, the state could come in and say, why aren't these on your, site? They wouldn't, but they could. So I added that in. And again, these are subject to change, these amounts. So I thought, 20,000 should be fine. And even if we have to wait on the property record sketches until they're done with the actual filter or whatever they use to do it, we can always hold on to that. This is what I did submit for the budget because it was due last week. So there's motor vehicle excise commitments that came in. That was the big, one of the big ones, or the big one for the year. Abatement certificates, which we reviewed at the last meeting. The late abatement application forms that you signed. Number 6, Tammy and I sent out the form of list, 3BC forms. There were a lot of things that went out in the mail, and I&E statements. Form of lists and 3BC forms are due March 1st. Unless we have an extension from the tax exempt organization for the 3BC forms, which has to be in writing, they are due March 1st. Income and expense statements, which I just wanted to make a quick statement about the I&E forms that have been sent out. The income and expense statements were sent to all commercial, industrial, and rental properties, everywhere from a 2-family up. And we're getting a lot of forms back that say same as last year. Well, these forms have not been sent out in over 3 years because they're only done during a certification year. So what I'm gonna be doing is sending those forms back to the property owners with a separate note saying that, it is a requirement that we get this information back so we can gather information for our new rental schedule that's needed as part of our fiscal year 23 certification. So, yeah, there's been quite a few. I mean, that information is very important because we use that to do an income approach on all the commercial and industrial properties as a backup to our cost approach. So, if anyone is watching and wondering what that form is, it is very important. And if you have any questions, give the assessor's office a call and we can step you through it. Those are due April 1st.
Yeah, I mean, just like everybody has a boss, and we have a boss, and that's the state. And the state requires that we get a certain percentage of these completed.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, we have to keep on sending them out until we get them
Yep.
completed.
It's very important. I mean, we have so few commercial industrial properties as it is, so it's very important that we get as many of them back so we can gather this information. And again, just because we didn't do it the prior year, it is a certification standard that these have to go out and they have to be, best attempt to give us your income information based on rentals for calendar year 21 and your expenses, whether the tenant paid it or the owner paid it for 2021 as well. The annual report is here. That has to be submitted before the 22nd, if you guys wanted to review that. The fiscal year 23 deed changes and map changes will be going out at the end of this week. I will say this was the most changes I have ever seen since I've been here. Lots of deeds, almost 200 deeds. Typically we have around 120. Map changes, there's not a whole bunch, but those will be going out as well. Any questions on that's exactly what we submitted last year. I just changed the numbers for from the recap sheet that was certified. Next year's will be a little bit more elaborate because of the certification. I didn't want to bog it down with too much information until we know what is being recommended by the DOR, if there's anything after a reval.
So basically, this information is given each and every year. It's pretty much the same information, correct?
Yeah, and that's what appears in the town report.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing is I'll say is I think it's a lot of useful information. Looking at this information all by itself,
Yes,
it would be more helpful if we had the previous year next to it. So just a thought, just
Yeah.
because if I was to look at this, I'd be like, okay, that's nice, but it doesn't really mean anything to me unless I compare it to previous years.
Right.
So I don't know, just a thought that, because we talk
well, I
about.
can ask Mike and Teresa if that's what they want to see.
Yeah, I don't know.
Last year's, we've never done that before. I mean, it's not a big deal.
No.
All I do is go in and change the form from year to year, and then I'll
That
add,
could be said for every,
comments.
every department.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, because you talk about the tax rate changing from this year, the last,
Yeah.
how much the change is, but
That's
all
true.
of this information would be really more useful if we had a comparison to the previous year. That's
Right.
all. And,
Yeah, we'll have to look into that. You're right, it'd probably be good for everybody to do that.
Well, yeah, because, I mean, you're just looking at a a snapshot in time.
Yeah, you'd have to have all the books,
Well, yeah, there's no
unless you
comparison.
collect all those books.
Yeah.
I do.
Some people do.
I have all the books.
You know, I've got them all in the office. And I do look at them. I mean, very important that we have something like that.
Yeah, but I think the town should be proud of the tax rate and the spending and I think give
Absolutely.
them all the information.
Number 9, Tom, is there any update?
Update today, no?
No update, okay. So we do have to go into executive session to continue the review. There's information about pending appellate tax court cases, and we still have fiscal year 22 real and personal abatement applications to discuss and review.
Okay, so at this point in time, I'm going to entertain a motion to go into executive session. And when the executive session is over, we will not be returning to the public forum.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.